Okay, so in this lesson, I'm just going to go over what we're going to cover this week. So we're talking about living things, and we want to look at like what are living things. So living things are called organisms, and they must have all of the following features. So in order for something to be alive, to be considered alive, it must have all of these features. So it's made of cells. Okay, so its cells are like the basic functional unit of a living organism. They have to eat, so they need nutrition or they need food. They must have excretion. So, for example, when they eat, they produce waste, so they have to be able to get rid of the waste. So, getting rid of any waste that they make. So, for example, CO2 is a gas that's a waste that's produced in the body during respiration. They must respond. So, for example, they react to changes in their surrounding. So, for example, if the environment gets too warm, they might move away from that environment. If it gets too cold, they might seek a warmer environment. Or they might respond to sounds or sights, for example, in the environment. And they must be able to reproduce. So, for example, they must be able to breed and reproduce and continue their species on. So, these are the characteristics, for example, that living things have. So if we think about, for example, a dog is a living thing. So a dog is made of cells. They need food, for example, they eat, they have to get rid of waste, so they excrete waste. They will respond to the environment, throw a stick and it'll run after the stick and fetch it and bring it back. And they reproduce then as well to make pups to continue on their species as well. Now, if you contrast that to, for example, a stone, for example, so stones are not made of cells, they're just made up of atoms. They don't need to eat, for example. They don't produce waste. They don't really respond to the environment, and they are not able to reproduce to produce other stones. Okay, so they're like the two kind of contrasts of living things. So these are the characteristics of living things. So it's important that you learn these and know them. Now, living things come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. So this refers to what's known as the diversity of living things. So we've all kinds of living organisms all around us. So the diversity of living things means that there are different types of living things. So living things are grouped into 5 sections. So we can think like all living things are grouped within these sections. So you have bacteria, fungi, plants, animals, and other. So bacteria, for example, are tiny cells that can cause disease and decay. So for example, bacteria, if you don't brush your teeth, for example, and you eat sugary foods, bacteria in your mouth will overgrow, and what they'll do is the waste that they produce will ruin the enamel on your teeth and it'll cause decay in your teeth. So these are bacteria and they're tiny microscopic organisms. Um, then the next kind of category or main group are what are known as fungi. So things like mushrooms, mold, and yeast, for example, are fungi. So, for example, if you leave bread out and it goes off and it goes blue molded, for example, that's mold. So that's a what's known as a fungi, or it's a bacteria that's produced. Yeast is also a bacteria that's used if you feed it sugar, it will actually produce alcohol, and they use yeast, for example, to brew alcohol. Then if we think, so these are tiny microscopic organisms. Then if we kind of get into the bigger realm, so if we think about plants, for example, so think about if you look out your window and look at all the green plants that are outside. So we have things like trees, grasses, and flowers. So these are all what are known as plants, and there's thousands of species of plants across the entire planet. But again, this is one of the main groups of living things. The next group are what are known as animals. So, for example, we come in underneath animals, we're humans. So, other creatures are also animals as well. So, things like fish and insects, for example, they would be classified within this group of animal. And then we have this other kind of strange group. We have these things like seaweed, for example. It's not a plant, it's not an animal, it's not a bacteria or a fungi. So, it's classified as an other living thing. And this other organism as well, which is known as the amoeba, and we'll talk a little bit more about this week. Again, this is would be classified as other. So living things can be, so these are the main groups of living things. Living things can be arranged into many other groupings. So for example, we can broadly split animals into 2 groups. So we have what are known as vertebrates. So these are animals that have a backbone, like us, for example. And then we can think about things that are invertebrates, which have no backbone. So like a fly, for example, it doesn't have a backbone, so therefore it's what's called an invertebrate. So what we're going to focus on now is the animal cell. So this is like the fundamental unit of all living things. So the animal cells have the following parts. So they have a thing called a membrane. So this is a tiny layer that surrounds the cell. And we look at a picture of it in a minute. So what does the membrane do? It holds the contents of the cell in place, and it controls what passes into and what passes out of the cell. In the center of the cell, then we have this thing called the nucleus. So the nucleus is a round structure that controls the cell. So it contains these things called chromosomes, which we're going to talk about. Chromosomes, they basically contain genes, and genes are made of DNA. And genes control features. So basically, your genes or your DNA, it controls features such as your eye color and your ability to form fingernails, for example. And genes are passed on from your parents to offspring as well. So during the process of reproduction, genes are passed on from the parent to the offspring. Then we have this liquidy substance that everything is inside in the surrounded by the cell membrane, and it's called cytoplasm. So this is a liquid that surrounds the nucleus, and it carries out so inside this nucleus, chemical reactions can happen, or reactions within the cell, and it contains small structures such as mitochondria. And these mitochondria are like, you could think about them as little power stations that produce power for the cell. So this is a simple diagram of what a cell looks like. So again, you have this cell membrane. You have, for example, the cytoplasm contains like chemical reactions happening here. And then in the center, you have the nucleus, which contains chromosomes, which has genes, which are made up of this substance called DNA. And this is what controls features such as your eye color. And so this is the basic building block of all animals. The next kind of cell that we want to look at are what are known as, so we talked about animal cells, and we can move on then to the other type of cell, which is known as a plant cell. So plant cells have the following parts. So they have a cell wall. So this is a strong structure that surrounds the cell membrane. It's made of this material called cellulose, and it gives strength to the plant cell. So that's the function of the cell wall. Then we have inside the cell wall, you have what's known as a cell membrane. And this is a tiny layer that surrounds the cell. And it holds the contents of the cell in place, and it controls what passes in and out of the cell. So this is what's known as the cell membrane. So animal cells have cell membranes, and so do plant cells. Plant cells have cell walls, but animal cells do not have the cell wall. Again, the plant cell has this control center, which is known as the nucleus. So it's a round structure that controls the cell. And again, it contains the chromosomes. Chromosomes contain genes, and genes are made of DNA. And genes control features such as like the petal color and the shape of the leaves. So if you look at a plant and you look at all the different features of the plant, those features of the plant are controlled by the genes that the plant has inside its nucleus of its cells. So, and genes, again, like in animal cells, they're passed on from parent to offspring. Plant cells also have the following parts. So they have this stuff called cytoplasm. So cytoplasm is a liquid that surrounds the nucleus, and it carries out so within this cytoplasm, within this liquid, there's some chemical reactions happen. So it carries out some cell reactions, and it contains small structures such as chloroplasts. And within these structures that are called chloroplasts, this is where the process of photosynthesis happens. And then you have this kind of, it's a small liquid-filled bag inside the cytoplasm, and it's called a vacuole. And basically the vacuole, it gives strength to the plant. So this is what a plant cell looks like. So again, you have this cell wall, and you have the nucleus, contains the DNA and the chromosomes that give all the features to the plant. It has this large opening in the middle of the cell, which is known as a vacuole. It has this liquidy substance that everything's contained in called cytoplasm, and you have the membrane, and then you have the cell wall. So if you think about a plant, it's made of billions of these cells all joined together, and that makes up the structure of the plant. And the last thing then just to talk about, and we'll be looking at the microscopes and using them tomorrow. So microscopes, so this is a basic light microscope. So a light microscope is used to enlarge or magnify the size of small objects. So the purpose of a microscope is basically to enable us to be able to look at really, really small objects. And the following diagram shows the parts of what's known as a light microscope. And the total magnification obtained by in a microscope is obtained by magnifying the power of the eye lens. So this is the eyepiece up here, and you multiply that by the objective lens, which are these lenses down here. And what that will do is it'll tell you how many times the object that you're looking at will be magnified. So if we look then at the structure of a basic microscope, so you have this piece up here, which is known as the eyepiece lens. You have these two knobs, so you have a coarse focus knob. So basically what this does is it moves the stage up and down, and it moves it up and down by fairly big increments. And we look at this tomorrow. You have then, when you have it roughly in focus, then you can use this, what's known as the fine focus knob, and it's used to kind of, it moves the stage up and down in really small increments. Here you have this thing called a nose piece, and it just houses or contains these things called objective lenses. And these lenses will have different magnifications. So for example, this longer lens will have a stronger magnification than this smaller lens. You have this stage. Okay, so that's where you put on whatever it is that you want to look at. You stick it onto the stage, and there's only a clip there, and you clip it into place. There's a hole then here that lets light pass through it, and then you have a mirror, for example, or sometimes instead of a mirror you'll have a light source. And what happens is you turn on the light passes through the object that you're looking at, and then it's visible then when you look at it through the eyepiece. But again, we'll go through this and we'll look at this in the morning. So this is just a very quick overview of what we'll talk about and look at this week.